This is the Michael Brian Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show, and I am joined with Meagan O'nan, who is a human connection expert. So she's also a TEDx speaker, multiple author, and she has almost 20 years experience, well over 15. So I'm really glad we got to chat to Meagan and dive into how to build more connection with each other. So Meagan, thanks so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me.
So how did you get started in all of this? I know in this day and age, building connections seems like a common subject, but how did you get started?
I've always been passionate about this subject. I grew up in Mississippi, which has a history of segregation and racism. And growing up here, I was always very attuned to how the world around me worked. And I didn't like it. I didn't like what I saw. And I remember when I was really small, reading Nelson Mandela's work, reading Martin Luther King Jr.'s work and Desmond Tutu's work, and just knowing that my place in the world and my calling in the world was to help break down barriers between people, no matter our differences. So it was definitely something that has always been intrinsically a part of who I am. Later in my life, when I was in college, I discovered that I was gay, and that was in 2004. And being from Mississippi and going to school at Mississippi State University, it was certainly something that I needed to hide in order to stay psychologically safe and physically safe. At some point, I was outed by an ex-boyfriend and had just a really traumatic experience with my faith community, with my friends, with teammates. I was an athlete in college, and with my family. And that whole experience of being outed and being essentially excommunicated from my community, for lack of better words, really pushed me into finding myself in a new light, in a new way. I ended up leaving Mississippi for a while, for about 6 years, and I came back in 2010. And since I've been back in, it's been 15 years now. Gosh, that's really weird to say. I have devoted my work and my career to building bridges between people and our differences, whether it's the LGBTQ plus community, and the conservative Christian community. It really doesn't matter. All of my work is centered around helping bridge that gap and learn to communicate effectively, learning to see each other for who we are beyond our labels.
I wonder what your thoughts are on this idea of, let's say your identity changes somewhat, or bits of you become more revealed, whether it's a personality trait, whether it's a hobby. In your case, it was your sexuality. How do you navigate that? Would you try to stay friends with the same people? I imagine in your case that wasn't really an option for you. So how did you go about refinding your people?
Good question. I did have some friends. They weren't out loud and proud and like going to stand up for me, but they were there. And how I handled it was I knew I needed to leave Mississippi. I needed to get out of the environment in which I'd been hurt so that I could find my people. And so when I left Mississippi, I ended up at Florida State. And to me at the time, spirituality and really trying to figure that piece of my life out after being hurt by spirituality and religion. I should say hurt by religion, not spirituality. I needed to find peace with that. And so that's where I ended up finding my people were at churches that were open and affirming and accepting, and also through sport. Sport was a big part of my life, and I ended up joining the rugby team at Florida State, which was insane. But along the way, while I was gone from Mississippi, I really ran into and found people who could fully support me, and I put myself in situations where I knew I was going to be accepted, and it made it so much easier to find my confidence. After I left Florida, I ended up in Colorado, and I found a place called the United Centers for Spiritual Living. And that was such a great place for me. I I met my wife there in 2008. We've been together for 17 years. We've been married for 11 years. And so I just went on this spiritual journey, essentially really finding my people. And once I got to a place where I felt like, okay, I can face Mississippi again. I can face my community again. I can have these hard conversations with my family and heal from this experience. Then I came back because I felt like I found my people. I know I'm loved and accepted. I know that I love and accept myself. And so now I can go and do the hard work.
It's interesting that you brought up feeling safe first before you were able to explore and discover the people that you were connected to. I find that quite interesting, and the reason is some people might never actually feel safe where they're living, whether it's emotionally, they're being
Right.
constantly disregarded or unaccepted in a
Right.
lot of ways. How would you suppose people could feel safer? They might not be able to, in air quotes, escape or leave, but maybe there are other things that they could do to start to feel this safety.
For me, in at the time in 2004 when I was outed, it was physically unsafe to be here. I had a friend who um he was very flamboyant and he was beaten to death like in a fast food restaurant. And there was a local mayor who was openly gay and he was murdered. So physically in Mississippi during that time, it was certainly unsafe to be out and proud and open. It was also very much psychologically unsafe because everywhere you turn, or everywhere I turned, there was people, questioning me for what they thought was my choice. And so this is something that I've wrestled with completely. And where I've found my safety, and things have changed. It's been 20 years. It's a much tolerable climate here in Mississippi. I wouldn't say it's safe in rural areas where it's mostly conservative Christian, a little bit more right wing, a little bit more red. I wouldn't say it's necessarily safe for people who are openly gay in those areas. But where I am, there's a university here. It's a little bit, I feel completely safe. But when I am in areas where I know it's not, I find my safety in my spirituality, honestly. And I know that may sound esoteric and unachievable, but I had to do that intrinsic inside work to get to a place where I felt like I'm going to be okay no matter what environment I'm in or whoever I'm around. And so I had to build that confidence, that sense of self-worth. And it's a constant thing that I work on. It's not like one day I woke up and I was like, oh, I feel safe inside of myself and I'm going to be okay. No, it's a constant spiritual practice for me every day to get up and choose to feel confident about who I am, do my spiritual work, always looking at myself in the mirror. And that's the thing that saves me every day is working on myself, feeling a sense of peace within myself. And that helps me no matter what interaction I'm having or wherever I am in the world.
Would you be able to share some of what the practice looks like? I really feel like being able to help people feel safer where they are might be really helpful for them.
For me, what's always been a constant is meditation. And some people may find that prayer is a better thing for them. Meditation, breath work, journaling is really good. It helps me to get all the thoughts out of my head that I'm having. I really struggle. I would say my number one struggle is just feeling like I'm not good enough. And I think that kind of comes with the territory of my experiences that I've had, but I also feel like as human beings, we all struggle with that in some regard, that we don't feel good enough. And so we're always up against that. And it creates a lot of tension in our world and in our environments and in our relationships. And so my work, my spiritual work is always around like working through that, allowing myself to feel whatever I'm feeling. That's why I like breath work. Breath work is great to just allow yourself to feel whatever emotions you're feeling and to release those and accept them and let them go. And then I really enjoy going to the gym. That provides a physical outlet for me and is really important for my self-care routine. I don't do it daily, but I definitely meditate or pray or do some sort of breath work or journal every day because I feel like if I don't, I have a 6-year-old daughter. Um, I definitely can't be the person I want to be for her, and I can't show up for myself. So there's a ton of other tools though. I mean, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's going for a walk, maybe it's being in nature. Everybody's different. But those are the things that work for me.
What I find quite interesting, especially in today's world, is people seem quite happy disagreeing with each other.
They
In the
do.
the more, yeah, they kind of walk around just being all agreeing to disagree 24/7. And
Hmm.
I think in some ways it's one of the consequences of, I guess, just being yourself and accepting yourself. And some
Hmm.
people take it the other way of not letting things in, not letting things that are somewhat contradictory, I suppose you could say, where, okay, they've been told to accept themselves, they've been told to understand themselves better and their opinions and what their values are, and they go down this rabbit hole of fully understanding themselves, but then they don't really know how to engage with people that are different to them. It seems like we need to bridge this divide or to help people interact with each other, whether we agree or disagree.
Yeah, I totally agree. I hear what you're saying too. I think that's absolutely true. And I think when we're, giving our opinions and feeling like we need to be right, then that's a form of control. And in today's world, a lot of us feel like we need to have some form of control because everything feels so chaotic and so out of control. And so disagreeing with someone or telling someone that they're wrong or that their opinion is the incorrect one is a form of trying to control a portion of life, a portion of relationships, a portion of, um, you know, it gives people a sense of temporary self-worth, if you will. And if you're really doing the inner work and if you're really paying attention and if you're really sowing that inner peace, then empathy is naturally being built, and you don't feel a need to be right or a need to change the other person's mind or the need to try to control a situation when it feels chaotic. And so if someone's really doing that inner work, um, I don't feel like there should be that. I mean, there's always the urge to want to be in control because we're human beings, but there's also a sense of empathy and wanting to connect and wanting to solve the current climate that we find ourselves in.
Do you find then that there's like this false self-awareness almost, where you mentioned empathy being built naturally because you understand yourself, which means, I guess, you're more likely to understand others, but why do you suppose that that's not happening?
Like I said, I think it's just a form of control. It's our need to want to control something in a chaotic world. And if we can do that with our opinions or behind a keyboard, then it gives us a sense of security. As human beings, we need and crave a sense of safety and security. It's one of the top things, survival. It's one of our top needs. And so if we need that and we're not cultivating a sense of being able to let go and let things unfold and let things flow, then that's going to be the thing that we jump to first in a world where there's so much division is trying to get others on our path to believe what we believe so that we can feel connected and we can feel in control of where things are heading.
I quite like that. I quite like that it's like a psychological need or a physical need
Hmm.
that unlocks everything else, which I find that quite fascinating because a lot
It
of
is
people
fascinating.
a lot of because they'll all speak about wanting to feel connected or wanting to get to know each other and possibly understand themselves a bit better, but if
Hmm.
they can't feel an element of safety first, that door's just not open to them, and then they're forced to control things that they haven't got a choice but to fulfill this safety first.
Exactly. It creates defensiveness, and we all have a need, like you said, we all have this need for connection. We all have this need for unity of being part of a group where we think and feel the same way. And so we're up against a lot just because of the nature of how we were made. And so we have to work hard on ourselves. We have to be willing. We have to, yeah, it's not like I wake up every day and think, oh, I'm gonna, I'm in the most peaceful state all the time and I'm gonna, go out and do a great job every time and say the best things to my family when they push my buttons. It's constant work. It's constant looking in the mirror. It's constant being willing to want things to be different. And we all have to do that work. I mean, it can't we are so distracted in our world today. There's so many distractions. If you try to read the news all day, you're screwed. And social media and all the things that are going on, we have to be able to step back, cut those things off, and get in touch with silence and listen and get back to a sense of self-worth. But it's not an easy thing to do in today's world. It takes effort.
So, with all of the distractions and this need to control things and to feel safe, how do we then start to look outwards a little bit? How do we then start to connect with somebody else when we have so much going on? It seems like a tall order.
Mhm. It is. It's a very tall order. And like I said, it takes effort. I know from, I'm married. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and my mother-in-law lives with us. We live on 7 acres. We have a lot to take care of. And my wife and I have our own businesses and we have animals. And, I get it. Life is busy. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of places to be. And for me, I, um, put myself in situations where I'm a part of the community and I'm on a couple of nonprofit boards. I make time for these conversations. I welcome people into my office to have these conversations. I make an effort through my work and my writing to invite people in for these conversations. So it takes like a constant effort to create space for them. And like I said, it's not an easy task that we have, but just a little bit of effort, one step forward, maybe attend a workshop, maybe go to a class, go somewhere where you're going to meet people who are different than you, being intentional about where we put our energy, if it's something you desire to do, is really all we can do. And then if you're online, even if you don't want to get out into the community and be with people face to face, spread positivity online, say nice things to people, be kind. Let's support each other in a different way than just blasting people with our opinions and what we think is the right path.
What I quite like about what you said there was being able to be around people that are different to you. Because with the idea of technology and social media, it can be all too easy to just stick to your lane, so to speak, and only be
Exactly.
around people that are like you. And I heard someone say just last week that it's creating this echo chamber where everyone's the same. Everyone that you're speaking to is the same as you, same
Mhm.
opinions, you're all supporting each other in your own little world, so to speak. It's actually making the divide even bigger because you can't imagine people that have a different opinion to you if you never look outside the window to see what other people are doing.
Exactly. And I happen to be very lucky. I am very different than most people here. So the opportunity abounds every day. My family is thinks and sees the world very differently than I do, and they live close by and very much a part of our lives. And so there's always a challenge there. And I live in a, mostly conservative state. So I'm very different spiritually. I'm very open about who I am as an openly gay woman. I'm married. We have a daughter that goes to a Catholic school. So there's always opportunities for me to be surrounded by people who are different than me. So I'm very accustomed to those situations and very comfortable with those situations. But I think the majority of people who aren't like me or who aren't surrounded by people who are different than they are, I think it is very uncomfortable. I think it is very hard for them because you're just not used to it. But the great thing is that when we go into that discomfort and we allow interactions to happen with people who are different than we are, beautiful things can happen. Like a world can open up to you where your perspective shifts and opens up your heart and opens up your world and can actually change your life. I love being here. I love being different. I love being around people who challenge me and push me to dig deeper into who I am. But it has been a journey to get there. It's not like I came back to Mississippi in 2010 and was like, oh, this is going to be fun, because it wasn't. It was hard and it was uncomfortable. It's taken a lot of baby steps, a lot of practice, a lot of willingness, a lot of hard conversations and interactions to get to a place where it's like, okay, I'm really comfortable in my skin. It doesn't matter what situation you put me in. I'm probably going to be just fine. I'm going to be okay. It takes time. It's not something that's just going to happen overnight. We have to be willing to cultivate, like I said, our inner uh, a sense of self-peace, a sense of inner peace, a sense of knowing and being okay with just being who we are and allowing other people to be who they are.
What I'd be really interested to know though is let's just say we start to do this, but then how do we lean into those conversations and allow these different opinions to make our world more accurate is the only way I could explain it. So if you stay in your own bubble, there's a chance that differing opinions might make your life more realistic or more accurate to what is reality, so to speak.
Right.
If let's say you spend 1 hour a week with people that are different to you, but then in your head you just kind of go, oh, well, I can go back to my reality in about an hour's time when this interaction ceased. I can go back to my little world and essentially not learn anything. What comes about then? Like, how do we encourage people to lean in and allow these different of opinions to actually shape us? Because I think in some ways, we're better off because of these different opinions. What happens if we don't allow that? Like, how can we encourage this?
I think what stops people a lot of the time from wanting to have these interactions is just not knowing how to approach them, not knowing what to say, not knowing that there are a lot of tools out there that can open up a conversation in a way that it doesn't feel like you're in a disagreement or that you're going to get into a fight or have a difference of opinion where you can't get through it. So I think educating people on what those tools are is a really important step to make people feel more comfortable to stretch beyond that hour a week. And there are so many great programs and online platforms. There's one through StoryCorps that is called One Step Closer, where you can actually go online and set up meetings with people who are on the opposite end of the political spectrum, the religious spectrum, and have a facilitated conversation with people that's just about your lives and your stories and not about what you believe or what your opinions are, just your fears, your wants, your values. And that's what I do in my work. So if I'm working with a corporation on team building, or I'm having a conversation with a Baptist minister in my office, the first thing I always want to know is like, what's your story? How did you get to where you are? What are your fears? Like, what do you value in life? And focusing in on those things that we have in common is often the great denominator that can help build trust in a relationship, even if you see the world completely opposite. So, to answer your question, I think giving people the tools, educating people on the options and the possibilities are a great way to help break down those barriers in our minds first so that we are more open to having more opportunities besides an hour a week to interact with people who are different than we are.
What's just sprung to my mind is the potential for leaving your current group if things change too much. So, I mean, you might have to come with me a little bit, but let's just think of religions for now, just because it seems like an obvious thing, because it's a belief system, it's what they believe to be true about the
Right.
world and that sort of thing. If you allow, let's say, someone of a different religion to influence yours, the way you see the world, if you then take that back to your own community with your own sense of beliefs, with a new sense of belief, so it's changed, what happens then? And I think people have this fear of, I guess, being ostracized from their current group of people if they change too much. So they have this desire to stay the same because otherwise they could end up with no people again, so to speak, and they then have to go out and find a new group to become a part of, in the sense of it's actually encouraging people to not change, if you see where I'm coming from.
Fair. That's a great question. And no one has ever asked me that. It's a really great question. And I mean, I hear where you're coming from in asking it. And I think that's a legitimate fear for people. I get it. Like, I don't want to grow. I don't want to outgrow where I feel safe. I don't want to outgrow where I, feel like I have some sense of connectivity and a sense of unity. I get it. And but as human beings, at least this is my perspective and my belief, we are constantly being called to grow. Maybe not called, but it is a part of our nature to grow and be challenged and stretch ourselves. I feel like that's why we're here. And if we're in touch with that and we know that part of being a human being is growing and stretching and healing so that we can experience life in even greater and more beautiful ways, then sometimes that's going to mean moving on from relationships that aren't going to serve the new part of who you are whenever it is you do transform or change. And that's a hard reality to face. I have a set of maybe 4 friends that are really, really close to me that I know are going to evolve with me and support me no matter what life throws at me, or no matter how I change or how I shift or how I um, change course. I know they'll be there. And that's enough for me. I don't need to have hundreds of people being on the same team with me. I just need to be myself. I need to be who I am, and I need to be true to me, whatever that is, because that's where I find the greatest sense of self-peace and self-worth, and a very high value of mine is integrity, and I need to be in integrity with who I am. And so I've come to a place, maybe it's because I was, excommunicated from my community and I had no one. And I know what that's like. It doesn't scare me to be back there because I've been through it and I got through it and I am better for it. So I don't wish that upon anyone, but I also know that when we have been rejected, we can get through it. We are strong enough intrinsically to get to a place where we can find our people again. And so I think there has to be a sense of faith in that. There has to be a sense of letting go. There has to be a willingness to evolve. It's just a part of life. If we can't let go, then it makes life very, very hard.
I wonder what traits these friends of yours have, because if you think of people that will stay with you no matter how you change, no matter how your beliefs change, whether it's politics or religion or even what you believe is healthy, let's say your diet changes, as daft as that sounds, and you've got friends that will stick with you because you are who you are, no matter what that shows up like.
Mhm.
What traits do those people have? Because I wonder if more people embodied those, then they could be the kind of people that would stick around no matter what beliefs you hold, no matter what values you grow into, they will always be there.
I would say the biggest traits that they share in common, and none of them are friends with each other. They're just friends with me, and which is funny. They take really good care of themselves. They take care of themselves in the way that I take care of myself. And they are always willing to grow and change themselves and evolve, and they communicate really well. And we share, we're very vulnerable with each other with where we are. And I feel like when there's a sense of vulnerability in a relationship or a friendship where you're just accepting the other person and you're seeing them for whatever their struggles are, then it's really easy to get to a place of acceptance and willingness to just roll with it and let that person have their experience, no matter what it is.
I quite like the way that you phrased that, in that you're letting them live their life and have their experience, no matter what that is. How do you have conversations with these people? What does that go like? If you come back from, I don't know, quite a impactful experience, it could be a conversation that you had with someone, it could be a client, it could be a corporation that you'd worked with, and it shifted your perspective slightly. How does that go? How do you have that conversation with them? Because it sounds like you would have these conversations with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell them everything and they tell me everything. And there's just this, there's already a sense of trust and safety there. So I don't need to warm up a conversation and, scratch the surface about the weather and all of that. We always just dive in. We've built that trust. We've built those strong foundations where I can say, hey, I had this experience. This is how I felt. This is the way I'm seeing it. This is my perspective. And I'm not judged. There's no like, well, what about this, Megan? Or maybe you should do this. They're not trying to fix me. They're not trying to solve anything for me. They're not trying to tell me how I should do something unless I openly ask. There's a sense of acceptance where I can just say what I need to say. I'm held by that friendship. I'm held by their love and their acceptance and them seeing me beyond my labels, and it's mutual. And I give that back to them. And so we create a space for each other where we can be vulnerable and we can accept each other and we can have, just that open space to explore how we feel and think about things.
I find it really, really refreshing that you've found people that you have this level of trust with. Like, trust seems to be the underlining thing, in that if you trust someone, whether it's 100% or nearly there, it's almost like it causes that safety as a consequence of
Hmm.
that. So I wonder how people can start to build trust in a way that makes sense, because I imagine there will be situations where trust is built, but it's not true. Maybe there's some underlying reason for it. Maybe they've got other things on their mind alongside this building trust, as in it's more purposeful, it's more intentional for whatever reason. But how is trust built appropriately or correctly or deeply, or whatever word makes sense? I think it needs to be more than just following certain steps, and encourage people to trust you a bit more. It sounds like there's more to it to be able to then take it deeper or
Yeah.
take it in a more safe way.
I would start by just being a trustworthy person, doing what you say, um, being there for people in the way you want them to be there for you. I think when it comes to a value or a characteristic that we want to see in other people, we need to cultivate that in ourselves. And that is a very empowering place to begin because then you're not looking to another person to give that to you. Because if you're a trustworthy person and you allow yourself to be that, it's easier to see that in other people. All that to say, when I think about my wife and being in romantic relationships, that is where our trust buttons get probably pushed the most. Um, I believe that trust is a choice. And I have had to remember when we've had disagreements, in the middle of a disagreement, I have to remember this person loves me. This person wants the best for me, and I want the best for them. There is no need why we need to continue to put up our defenses. And we have both agreed that we are choosing to trust each other, and that makes disagreements so much easier to work through because we know that we love each other and that the end result is that we both are at a place where we feel safe. And so, yeah, cultivating trust within ourselves and being the friend that we want others to be to us, and realizing that trust is a choice and that people do deserve an opportunity and that people are human beings and they are going to mess up. They're going to make mistakes, just like I make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. And I guess the third thing would be that when you're being trustworthy and you're being a good friend, or you're bringing everything you can to the table, and other people aren't showing you or meeting you where you are, being okay with moving on is a part of the process too, and finding those people who will meet you where you are. So I think it's a complex answer, but it's also simple, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, there's an element of at least you can work on yourself in this sense of if you start with yourself, you know, things like doing what you say and trying your best to understand the other person and possibly compromising if you have to,
Right.
that's something that you can control, not to take it full circle here,
No, it's true.
but it's the only thing that you can really do anything about.
Exactly. And that is more empowering. It's also maddening, especially for, us human beings who want to know what other people are going to do and how they're going to view us and if they're going to like us or love us or whatever it is. So it is actually very freeing and an empowering way to do it.
How would you suppose we can start to go down the trust road instead of the control road? Because obviously there's definitely a line where they might tend to cross over or bleed through into each other, so to speak. How do we ride that line? How do we foster trust without diving down this control path too many times?
Again, I go back to just cultivating it within ourselves first and trusting ourselves, trusting our instincts, and knowing that no matter what situation or conversation we're placed in, that we will be in alignment with who we want to be in the world. I think that's the most empowering place to be. But if it's, you're sitting there, you're having a conversation with, let's say I'm sitting having a conversation with my mom who voted differently than I did this election. How I usually approach that, or how I did approach that conversation was really trying to understand why she chose what she chose, wanting to say, okay, please tell me, I want to know. And sometimes I think we're afraid of wanting to know because it's going to make us feel bad about who we are and our choices. And if you can get beyond that and just allow a person to tell them how they think and feel about something without the agenda of needing to change their mind, which is big, without needing to change their view of the world, then it can be a really beautiful experience because in the end, what we usually see when you can get beyond the opinion itself or the belief itself is we get to a point where we see we're just the same. At the end of the day, we're all operating from fear or we're operating from our highest values. And if we can help each other understand what those are in conversation, then the opinion or the belief becomes irrelevant. And so we have to be willing to build the trust by being vulnerable and being open and being accepting of the other person.
It sounds to me like there's an element of trying to let go of some of the agendas or some of the predictions that you have. So let's say you have a prediction where if I have this conversation, there's a chance I might change or I might feel somewhat uncomfortable because deep down, maybe you even agree with this person, even somewhat, maybe not all the way, but maybe some of the way, and that might make you feel uncomfortable because, you know, you voted for something else, hypothetically.
Right.
How do you suppose people can get past these things? Because it seems like it's an impossible task, and you might actually be better off just accepting it and just being okay with the fact that you actually agree with some of it, and that's okay as well. How do you navigate that? It sounds like an impossible task.
I think deep down, I think you're right about all of those. But I also think deep down, what we're really afraid of is not being seen fully by the other person. So if they have a different opinion or a different belief or they view the world in a different way, then how can they fully see me? Are they going to accept me? I think we're afraid of not being accepted in those moments. I think that's the real fear. And that's why we're so defensive, because it is so intrinsically important to us as human beings to be seen and to be accepted and to not be rejected. And that is the thing that holds us back from having these conversations because we don't want to feel that. We don't want to feel like we're not good enough. That's the true driver behind people not being willing to go in depth into these conversations and go beyond the belief or the opinion. It's not about the belief or the opinion. It's about we're avoiding the feeling of not feeling like we belong and that we aren't good enough. And if we can recognize that and take that into a conversation and know that no matter what, I am good enough, no matter how this person thinks or feels, and approach it from a soft and a vulnerable place. At least this is what has worked for me in the last 15 years in breaking down barriers in my community and with my family. Then it's a very different conversation than coming to it with, hey, I don't think the way you do, like, okay, but tell me how you think and feel about this. It's all about the energy you bring and the confidence you bring and the opportunity you bring to the conversation. If I'm coming with defensiveness, I'm going to get defensiveness. If I'm coming with openness and with softer words, probably it's going to be a very different experience. So I think we need to recognize the real reason why we're not having these conversations is because we don't want to feel like we're being rejected.
It sounds to me as well that there's an element of because these things are important to you, then they are somewhat personal. In that if there's a disagreement, then you're also disagreeing with them as a person, if you
Right.
see what I mean. So that might
Exactly.
be an element of personalizing the conversation rather
Exactly.
than what was the opposite of that? Maybe objectifying it, making it purely about the belief or purely about what you think versus the
Mhm.
fact that you think it, making it
Right.
a personal thing.
Exactly.
I really do think that people need help trying not to get too attached to things. Like it seems like there's a real sense of they get attached to their beliefs and their values, they get attached to the other person's beliefs and values and how they're contradictory. And it just seems like there's a real sense of importance and attachment to things. When, as you said, we need to learn this softer way of communicating, this sense of it doesn't necessarily matter what the belief is in that I'm not going to hate you for it, but I just
Right.
want to understand things in a way that makes my experience more accurate or more fulfilling to me. Because maybe there's some elements of it that will improve my view.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's okay too. Like, if you want to be attached to your opinions and beliefs, then be attached to them. But that doesn't mean that we try to persuade other people to believe and see things the way we do. And that's where I think we all make a mistake is feeling like, okay, if I think this is the right path, it's just the right path for me. It doesn't mean it's the right path for everyone around me. Everyone deserves the opportunity to go at life the way they want to. And if you don't like the way they're going at it or they're hurting you, then then don't be a part of it. But there has to be a level of acceptance of ourselves and where we are, and also a level of acceptance of where people are on their path and let them have their journey. We all deserve that opportunity to be able to live and think and feel our way through this complicated experience called being a human being.
Yeah, and I imagine as well, like if you want to be in the person's life, then there are some consequences for that. So if you want them to be there, if you want to be involved, if you want to know them and spend some elements of your life with them, whether it's a family member, a friend, a colleague, whatever it happens to be, then you
Right.
need to be prepared for the consequences or just some of the repercussions of, okay, well, we're going to disagree sometimes because they believe in this, whereas I believe in that. We may butt heads every now and again, but that's not going to change how I feel about them. That's not going to change the fact that I want to be connected to them in some way.
Exactly. Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
Nevertheless, though, I do feel like this is not an easy task, is it? There's some
No.
elements where we need to be able to be a bit more accepting, try and release things a little bit more often, and possibly just be more aware of when things are going to get heated and maybe take some steps when that happens. Are there many things that people can do? You mentioned meditation and breath work and things, but I'm leaning
Mhm.
towards anything else that could be helpful because I think that some people might need more than just meditating because it's
Sure.
hard to meditate mid conversation if that makes sense.
Yeah, and in my TED Talk, I talk about this. The name of my TED Talk is What to Do When You Disagree with Someone You Love. So it's a really great 11-minute talk that people can go and listen to, where I talk about those tough moments when you're in conversation with people and a disagreement comes up that you either aren't expecting or maybe you are expecting it. And I when I'm in those moments with a family member or someone I love or someone I don't know really all that well, I always say, hey, this topic is really, really important to me. And I want to know how you think and feel, but I also want you to know how I think and feel. And just making it known that that moment is uncomfortable by saying that, by saying, hey, this is really important, and taking that step back and diffusing the energy of what may be defensiveness or may be discomfort or this feeling of like, oh, I may be rejected here in a minute. I need to take a step back. Let's come back to, hey, we're both human beings. We both want to be seen and heard, and let's create the space for wanting to be seen and heard. And usually I'll steer away from the disagreement itself and say, what you feel this way, but what is the fear underneath that? Like, what are you really afraid of happening if this isn't true? And so there are a lot of questions you can ask. There are a lot of open-ended ways that you can approach a person to um, make the space feel more open when you're being faced with a disagreement you didn't expect, or maybe it's one you did expect. But there are a lot of tools, a lot of questions, a lot of ways to approach it that doesn't necessarily focus on the belief or opinion itself and gets beneath the surface in talking about what common values do we share here. So I'll give you an example so that it makes it more palatable for people. I'll go back to my mom. We voted differently at the election. And my conversation with her was, what are you afraid of happening if you didn't vote for this person? And for her, it was all about, they're in their mid 70s. Safety and security is so important to them. They're still working full time. And they thought the person that they chose was going to give them the safety and security they need to get through the rest of their lives. That is their top value right now with where they are in their life. And I completely respect that. And for me, my top value is my family and us having equal rights. And so I was able to say, hey, this is my top value. And this is what I'm afraid will happen if our rights will be stripped away, if I voted for this person, or if I didn't vote for this person, or whatever. That's my top value. And that's what means the most to me. I don't need my mom to have the same top value as me. We're different people. And we were able to come to an understanding because we were both willing to voice what our fears were, what we were afraid of happening if our person didn't get elected. And that created, we still feel very differently about things politically, but it's okay. Like we understand each other. She understands where my top value is. I understand her top value, and that's hers, and I accept that, and she accepts me. So I think if we can get beyond the opinion or the belief and really understand each other on a value or a fear basis, it makes it so much easier to have these conversations and to accept people for where they are.
I wonder if there's an element of, so what I usually do, and this is just more of me just sharing what I sometimes do if someone disagrees with me or there's an element of I'm just unsure about what they mean, I will say stuff that would help me understand what they've actually said. So I'll almost repeat it back to them in a
Hmm.
sense of, okay, so what I'm hearing is this what you mean when you say this, that, and the other? If they then say no, and then they then essentially repeat themselves in a different way in the hope that I can understand it more, that then means that at least what I've heard is more accurate than what I thought.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
sometimes
that's a
I
great
can
tool.
I can almost get confused sometimes, or the way that I see the world highlights the fact that I'm just not hearing it in the right way.
Sure.
Usually that helps me.
I love that.
That's something that usually helps me. That works in a short space of time. It also helps confirm what they've said, which means if they didn't necessarily say it how they wanted to, it gives them the opportunity to say it or change it. That then just makes it so much clearer. We're both on the same page as much as possible. And then usually what I thought they'd said wasn't actually the case.
Right.
And then I go, oh, well, actually, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, given this, that, and the other. And
Exactly.
that makes perfect sense to me now. Thanks very much for clearing that up. And usually it's a weird little exercise because it almost feels sanitary in my own head,
Right.
where I say it a couple of times and I think, oh, I'm actually just saying it without realizing. They also get a bit awkward because they're surprised that I'd misheard it. And it just becomes this weird moment of, oh, we're actually both on the same footing here.
Right.
Why were we getting defensive?
Right. I love that. And it's a tool everyone can use. Active listening and repeating back. It's a great therapy tool. And because we go in to, we have our own perceptions and how we hear things. And when we hear something, we're, I love that. I love that you do that. I think that's a great tool for people to use. And it's an easy one to use, like you said, is just repeating back what you think you heard and then getting clarity on what they actually meant would clear up so many different things. We all jump to defensiveness and wanting to be right and not wanting to feel like we don't belong instead of just getting clarity around the words people are using. Because there's always more underneath. It's not always about just the words.
Yeah, that's it. And sometimes as well, it's literally just a change in the word. So they'll
Right,
say something and I just didn't necessarily understand one individual word. But
right,
after they clear it up, they go, oh, what they really meant to say in the way that would make sense to me would have been this word instead.
right. Yeah,
But
I
they
love
just
that.
use a different word, and now it makes perfect sense. So I'm wondering, is there any other little techniques like that that people could take away and use? And then I'm really curious about possibly any other last bits of advice as well. So I've really enjoyed this actually. It's been really, really cool, Megan. I've enjoyed diving into different ways of communicating with people and trying to help people understand each other better. So are there any other last little pieces of advice that you could give the people that are listening?
I've enjoyed it too. I've really enjoyed your questions and conversation and like digging in. I haven't been on a show or had an interview where we dug so deep into this, and so I really appreciate it very much. And this is going to sound like a silly piece of advice. but it has worked for me in very tense situations where, okay, so it's uncomfortable. It used to be uncomfortable for me to even like go to the grocery store or the post office because I knew I was going to run into people who thought being gay is a sin or not okay, or that, I'm not a good person because of it. And something that I do, even to this day, to diffuse the situation before any words are spoken. And this may not be the best way for everyone, but I hug the person. I hug them, I ask them how they are, and I enter the engagement or the conversation with presence. And that always helps me because it's an action I can take that makes me feel safe in a way. Um, so when you asked that question, I had to think about beyond just being in the conversation, what else can you do? And that's something that reaching out, that providing a safe space for the other person too, it's been a very helpful tool for me.
And for those that are listening that would like to enter your world, Megan, how can they do that? So if you've got any websites or social media to share, this would be the best time to share that.
The best place is to my website, meaganonan.com. And if you want to check out my TED Talk that was recently released, it's on YouTube. What to do when you disagree with someone you love. Just type in that title and my name and you'll find it. I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook. You can find me everywhere.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Megan, I've enjoyed this. Thanks so much, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.